We like to talk about money on this show because money affects every single one of us, whether you have a lot of it or a little bit of it. And money fights are the number one cause of divorce in marriage. And money generally can split up families long after kids are grown and out of the house. So it's clearly something worth talking about. In today's episode, what we're going to do is help you by revealing to you the source of all of your money fights and then give you a tool to solve that problem and have more unity in your marriage when it comes to money. Welcome back to the show. Pumped to be with you. We've been having a lot of fun doing these episodes. I was just telling Shay, I was on a coaching session yesterday with a gentleman who said, hey, my wife and I listen to the Family Goals podcast when we go on hikes. We go on hikes and we listen to an episode together. And then when the episode's done, we discuss the episode while we're finishing up our hike. I thought that was awesome.
Yes. So if you're listening to this, that was such a cool story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Aaron and Becca. So thank you, Aaron and Becca. Shout out to you, the West family.
We dedicate this episode to you guys.
It sounds like we're a DJ on a radio station. This is going out to Aaron and Becca. But yeah, so hey, fun date night opportunity.
Absolutely.
Go for a walk or a hike and co-listen to an episode of the Family Goals podcast for 30, 40 minutes and then debrief. Right?
Love that.
Look at that. You're active. You're connecting.
Absolutely.
You're growing. So anyway, I thought that was cool. But we're going to talk about money today. We haven't done a money episode in a while.
And actually, it's going to be part of a 2-part money series, right? The holidays are coming up. I mean, as of time of recording right now, it's October. You're probably starting to think about all the expenses associated with seasonal travel and Thanksgiving and Christmas and, Christmas presents and then rolling into the new year, all of the economic unrest. I think money is always a topic on our brains, but I think this time of year, there tends to be a little bit more money angst. And so we thought that it would be just timely to do a bit of a 2-part series, specifically diving into money and money-related tensions in preparation for you entering the holiday season, and then even thinking ahead to next year and what would it look like for your family to go into next year with a better grasp on your money without money fights, with less money stress, and not because you're necessarily making any more money, but just because you're approaching money differently. You have maybe a different plan for the money. So we're really excited about these next 2 episodes. Hopefully these are going to be, they are going to be super practical, super helpful, and potentially legacy changing conversation, because the way that you think about money is going to trickle down to your kids and their kids. So let's figure this out and get it right and remove it as a point of tension in our marriages.
Yeah, absolutely. I always heard it said that health and wealth, so health-related topics and money-related topics, are the 2 areas that everyone has to deal with, either now or later.
You have a body.
You're going to have to deal with health questions. Someone you're going to deal with money questions. It affects all of us across the planet, our health and money. So it's interesting. It's worth talking about. So today is going to be transformative. This could literally be transformative for your marriage. So what I want to get into, tee this up with I love this quote from Rich Litvin, because I think it sets the tone or sets the table even for the discussion we're about to have, which is that money doesn't solve money problems, because money problems are never money problems. And I think that represents where we're going to go with this, is that we tend to fight in marriages or relationships over the money. Yeah. And we'll fight over, where are you spending on this? And why is this bill coming in? Or I thought we said we were going to do this, or I thought we'd have saved this by now. Whatever the fight is, it really isn't about that money thing that you're fighting about. It's really about what it represents. And it's like the tip of the iceberg, and underneath the surface is really the issue that's never been addressed. And maybe you never even thought about.
And that's why no matter how much money, that's why money isn't the solution to money problems, right? Because if you add more money into a situation, it still hasn't addressed the way that you think about money, the fears that you have around money, the presuppositions that you have around money. So
the habits that
you have around money, that all stays the same. You're still you, just add a few more zeros. So money solves some problems, but it doesn't solve what's at the heart of the way that you think about and approach money. So we got to figure this out. We got to get this right.
Yes, exactly. So if you're literally broke, we were on food stamps for 18 months.
We know broke.
There is a point where you're I just need to get some money because it's like oxygen, and without it, I'll die. But once you're out of a place of unrest, I can now, I'm somewhat stable. Then when you're starting to fight about money just in general, to Shay's point, whether you have a lot or little, more money is never the problem, or even what you're doing with the money isn't even the problem. It's the thing underneath the thing. And so what we want to posit to you today is that each of you, if you're married, are coming into the marriage with your own money story. Your money story. And the way I think about a money story is it's a certain set of beliefs, expectations, and emotions associated with money that you have, whether you think about it, know it, or not, because they were shaped in your childhood. Mm-hmm. So, for example, this could be your feelings or expectations or thoughts around whether money is good or bad, whether like having a lot of it is good or bad, whether having little of it is good or bad. It could be how much should you work for money? Like, should you work hard for money or don't work? So, like, we don't need to make a lot of money. You should be working that hard for money. It's just money. How should it be spent? Like, what you think money should be spent on versus not spent on. How should money be saved or not? And how much? What do you deem as wasteful? This one's fascinating. Even outside of marriages, we can all judge someone else. Like, why would they drive that car?
Look at those sneakers.
Look at
how big that house is.
Did you know that there are no rules about what is wasteful, but what you think might be wasteful might not be wasteful? Funny story about that is my wife, Shay. She's right here. Like I'm talking.
Have you met her?
Have you met her? She's great. She's right here. Welcome, Shay. Welcome, everybody else. Shay and I discovered one day early in our marriage when I somehow saw how much money my parents were spending on their grocery budget without kids, just two grown adults, no kids in the house, and they were spending way more on groceries than we were, and we had a family of 4. And I remember judging them hard. Mom, if you're listening, I'm sorry. I remember judging you hard, like, oh, all these avocados you'd buy, and all this. I was like, how could their grocery budget be that high? And then I realized in a conversation with my mom that they never go out to eat at restaurants. And they were like, why would you go out to eat at a restaurant? It's so wasteful. And I'm like, why would you spend so much on it? And then I realized, oh, we value different things. And so we were, not that she was judging me, but I was like, oh, I was judging her because I thought that's wasteful to spend so much at the grocery store. Mm-hmm. What a waste. And well, I'm going out to a restaurant, and that is arguably wasteful potentially. So what is wasteful? I don't know. Yeah. There's no rules here. It's just whatever you think is what we all have clues. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What is wise? Oh, it's wise to do this with your money. You have expectations, beliefs, and emotions around what you think is wise.
Wise to buy a house, not wise to buy a house. Wise to go into debt, not wise to go into debt.
There's hardly any rights or wrong there. It's just whatever you grew up with. This is the hard one for all of us, but how much is enough? What does enough even mean? What, like in your mind?
I don't know if that word is in the modern vernacular.
Not in America.
What is enough?
We took that word out of the dictionary. And then like
it got replaced with more.
More.
Enough equals more.
Yeah, exactly. And then this is the practical examples, whether you should budget or not. Yeah. I mean, I see this a lot like, we never budgeted growing up, which to that point, this is what we're talking about. Yeah. What did you see? What was modeled? And what did you catch? They say with kids, more is caught than taught. Even if it wasn't taught to you, this is how you handle money. What was modeled to you? What did you see growing up? Because that is what you're bringing into your marriage. And it's neither good nor bad, but when it bumps up against somebody else who has a different money story, who saw and experienced different things growing up, well, then I wonder where your tension is coming from. That's the premise.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Fair?
Yep. Totally fair.
So I thought it'd be cool if you and I sort of just like shared some highlights, 30,000 foot view of our own money story. If we go back in time.
I was already starting to think about that when you were making that list.
Like if you go back in time, growing up, like what did you see? What was modeled? What were some of if you can think about some of the beliefs about money that you brought out of your childhood before we started to have our own conversations about money?
So my dad was in the military. I don't know where to place him. I guess lower to middle ranking. I don't know. In the military, we lived in government, and we lived on base. Sorry, not government housing, but we lived on base. Small 2-bedroom townhouse or whatever they would have called that on the military base. My parents both worked really hard. So I saw my dad always working. My dad was never without a job. He always had a 9-to-5. And my mom she stayed home with us when we were really young, homeschooled us for a few years. So she was really like all in with the family. But then she worked when we were kind of getting into more high school age and that kind of thing. She worked. So she had a job. She contributed to the family as well. She went back to college. She got a degree. So I knew that hard work, money came from hard work. I saw hard work modeled. But I do remember a lot of money stress. I remember overhearing money fights. I remember maybe not so much money fights as just money stress, like money stress. Like a bill would come that was unexpected, and it was like there just wasn't margin. We always had what we needed. We never worried about food or anything like that. But if an extra bill came, or the car broke down, or there was a tax bill, or just something that would have maybe been considered unexpected, there was a lot of stress around that. And I remember as the oldest child, like overhearing those conversations and carrying that stress around as a kid. I remember one time I was on the playground with a friend of mine, and I remember I'm swinging upside down from the monkey bars. So it shows you like how I must have been pretty young. And I was talking to my friend about whether or not we could end up homeless.
Wow.
Now,
how old do you think you were?
Maybe 10. I don't know. Wow. 9 or 10. And the reality is, like, I don't think we were anywhere close to being homeless, but that was what I was taking in as a kid. So money is tight would have been like one of those narratives. I don't know necessarily who managed the money in our house, or if my parents both kind of did it together. And I don't really remember much talk about money other than just the stress of like, how will we pay for that? Or that's, and we shopped at Kmart. We, bought stuff on layaway back when that was a thing. I don't think I realized where we were in comparison to other people. Sure. It all felt very normal. I always had shoes on my feet and the clothes I needed to wear, but it always felt like there was just barely enough. So I think to fast forward a little bit, and we've talked about this a little bit on another episode, one of the most poignant times that I saw that money story have impact in our life together was the first time that we had a car issue come up.
Oh, like a repair.
A repair needed as a married couple. And as soon as, we had whatever it was like we need the tires replaced or something like that.
A few $100.
A few $100. But I remember sitting in the car, and you called and you said, took the car to the shop. It's going to cost whatever, $295 to get this fixed. And instantly I had a flood of fear and negative emotion, like heart palpitations, like sweating. Like it was like all the money stress of my childhood came back in that moment of like, this is, I felt like as a kid, any small we were just kind of one disaster away. Maybe it is what it felt like. I don't know that was the reality, but felt like we were one bill away from things being really bad just based on the stress level that I saw. So when we had that bill, I remember just feeling that flood of emotions that really were from childhood. And you said, and I think I said to you, like, how are we going to pay for that? And you were like, oh, no, we totally have that money set aside in our car fund. Like, and I knew that. Like, I knew we'd been budgeting. It's not like you were budgeting and I didn't know we were budgeting.
Secret budget.
It wasn't secret budgeting. Like, I knew this. But still, to your point, the money narrative ran deep there, that this is a problem. This is something that causes a lot of dread and fear. And we had the money because we had been setting aside a little bit of money in our car fund every month. And so we had the money to pay for it, and it was no big deal. And I just remember the contrast of like, wow, oh my gosh, so this actually isn't a problem. Like this isn't, this isn't going to break us. This is just an expense that we already saved for in advance because we knew that we can't plan everything and it's likely to happen. So that was just one way that money, that was one way that I felt the realities of the money narrative growing up now. It's funny, actually, probably I'd be curious to talk about the differences that we have in like our approaches to money. Yeah. Because we actually are pretty, I don't know, we're aligned in
That's why I say what you were going to say.
No,
I see that face.
Got nothing. There are definitely certain things that I am more practical about. Like, I think I have my parents' practicality.
Yeah. Can you give me an example?
Yeah. Oh, they're coming. Don't worry. The examples are coming.
Bring it on.
My dad used to fix everything himself. I mean, I learned how to change the oil in my car as a teenager. Like, when I had my first car, I learned how to drain the oil out and refill it and, all that kind of stuff. You would never pay someone for that. You would never pay someone to mow your lawn. You would never, like, that's just not the home I grew up in. So I had a lot of narratives around what's worth paying for and what's not worth paying for.
Yeah,
and
that's great.
What do people like me, normal people like me, pay for versus what do, crazy rich people pay
Right.
for, that kind of thing. So things that come up where you and I are different, some on the practical side, like paying for lawn care or paying for, your car to be washed or paying for oil changes, like just things that I grew up thinking that, no, you just take care of those. You don't pay for people to do that. But stuff like rich people do. We're not rich people, we're just normal people. And then other things like vacations, definitely you have a much higher tolerance for how much to spend on like a hotel or even dinner out, I would say a little bit. You probably have a much higher tolerance for dropping some money on dinner, dropping some money on a
What do
trip.
my kids call me? I don't know if it's good or bad.
Graham's nickname in our family is super bouge, as if being bougie were a superpower.
The verdict is out whether it's a good or a bad thing.
I don't know if the verdict's out. I don't think it's a good
the verdict
thing.
is out. It is still unclear.
But generally with expenses like that, I tend to be much more practical. Like, I have these internal,
This is good though. Keep it going.
ceilings on this is how much you should spend on vacation. This is how much you should spend on a hotel room. This is how much you should spend on a, XYZ. And we had to work on that when we bought our home. Each of the homes, as we've kind of moved and changed and increased our standard of living, I have to, for my own peace, say, okay, babe, like, show me again how this is not crazy, and we have to look at the percentages, like, okay, like this is the total percent of our budget that we're spending on housing. Like, here's the safe percentages for that range. Like, this is what you want to stay away from. And I kind of have to, every time we have a major, major purchase like that, I have to be reminded that, like, based on percentages, like I know this feels crazy, but our standard of living is different. And so we're still in a good zone. Anyway, I feel like I'm running my mouth, but there certainly are lots of
it's gold.
Lots of differences in, the way that we've carried money narratives in. But I'm curious to know what your family's money narrative was. I don't know that we've talked very much about this.
Yeah, well, I want to get to that, but I want to just highlight, like, that was great. Thank you for sharing all those details. That kind of, hopefully you're hearing, like, oh yeah, like maybe things are coming up for you, specific examples, the way you react to things, your physical reaction to that car repair bill years ago is so interesting, because I've heard it said that, and I'll get the percentage wrong, but it's pretty close because it was really high. It's like that 90% of our thoughts are memories, thoughts we've already had before. So 90% of the things we're thinking throughout the day aren't new thoughts.
Yeah.
So just rehashing old stuff. So in that moment, for example, car repair bill, it is so wired into your heart, your mind, like the neural pathways of like, oh gosh, this equals this,
is bad.
and then here is the reaction that comes. Like, of course, it wasn't logical because you knew we had money if you stopped and thought about it. But that's the point. It's not a lot. None of this is
that was
rational.
like just my biological.
It's visceral. It's like your body
response to that,
responds, and that's not out of nowhere. Is what I think we're saying, is that that's coming from some experience you had, which is neither good nor bad. It just is. Yeah. And until you start to unpack it, you won't understand why you react a certain way. And your spouse certainly won't understand because they didn't live your money story. So they might think you're crazy. Like, well, why are you freaking out? And then that's when you can fight, because then, well, that was mean. Why did you say I'm freaking out? Or I don't feel cared for, or seen. But we're missing the thing, which is we've never discussed, wow, I didn't know when you grew up, it was so like that you as a 10-year-old on the monkey bars thought to some friend of yours, hey, I might be homeless, which may or may not be true, but that's what it felt like.
And if in that instance I had projected on you a lot of like fear and frustration and stress, and you might have absorbed that as like, that could have caused a money fight. Like, you could have absorbed that as like, why doesn't she trust me? Why doesn't
I'm
blah,
doing
blah, blah.
a good job. Yeah,
But
I'm
if
leading
you-
our family.
Exactly.
What's the problem?
But if you know my money narrative, then you can be a little more sensitive to that.
Yes,
Like,
and
oh, okay,
empathetic.
this isn't about our current
That's so
situation.
good, yeah.
She has a lot of stuff coming up for her that's based on what
So
the
good.
circumstances were when an unexpected bill would come up in her family of origin.
Yeah. So good. You crushed it. I hope that's helpful for you listening, because I think that's gold right there. I think for me, what I saw growing up was that my mom handled the money. So I always saw her paying the bills. And Dad, if you paid some of the bills, I don't remember seeing that, but I remember seeing Mom with the checkbook or the filing cabinet, and Mom putting like bills or paperwork. And I was like, oh, what's this drawer thing? She's like, oh, it's a filing cabinet where I keep all of our financial documents. I just remember like noticing things and, oh, okay, Mom must be the one that like keeps track of these adult financial things. And I remember my mom telling me probably the only set of money advice that I remember was that you got to have a budget. You got to have a budget. She showed me like a physical spreadsheet, or maybe it was just like written out, like, here's what we spend on groceries or the gas or the car, or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay. So there's categories. Oh, that makes sense. Like, that's about all I remember seeing. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. So
that's
that was
more than a lot of families have.
Yeah. I thought that was really cool. So I think that's one reason why when we got married, and I sort of had this panic moment when we were married of like, gosh, I really don't know anything about money. And that's what sent me down this journey of, we ended up going to an event where Dave Ramsey wasn't the main speaker, but he opened up. It was a Charles Stanley event, Andy Stanley's father, when he was still around, and he was teaching. And anyway, Dave Ramsey was there, and he was talking about money. I was like, this guy seems super practical, and I've never learned about money. I should probably get his book. And then Shay bought me his book, and I started to just consume it because I realized there's a lot I didn't know. But the one thing I did know that made sense was like, oh yeah, you got to have a budget, because that's what I remember seeing my parents doing.
So what's interesting about that is why budgeting has worked so, probably one of the reasons why budgeting has worked so well for us and was kind of an easy lift for us, was that you came from a home that had a budget. And so a budget felt very normative to you. Like, okay, a budget. Yeah, that's a good normal thing that families have. And I grew up in a home where if there was a budget, I don't know. They might have had a budget, but we didn't see it as kids. And so I grew up with a lot of internal unrest because I didn't know if there was a budget. So to me, a budget as an adult was like, oh, I can feel safe because I can see where all the money, I know exactly what money's coming in. I know how it's being parsed out. And there's some peace and safety for me in like being able to see it. So that's interesting. I'm just thinking this through. Like that's probably why both of us were like, yes, let's budget. It was for two totally different reasons that both had to do with our narrative around budgeting.
Yeah. Like
but
it made you feel safe.
It made me feel safe.
That's interesting.
And that's not to say my parents didn't budget. They may have had a budget. I just don't know. But not seeing it and knowing, okay, my parents know how much they're going to spend on food made me, as the oldest child, third parent, feel unrest that maybe was unneeded or unwarranted. But, budgeting to me brings a lot of calm and sense of control and a sense of understanding and peace. So.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. That makes a lot of sense. It's a cool catch. Real quick, the other thing I just remembered that you said that I thought was really worth noting was you mentioned that, birth order, you were the first child. That will affect your money story for two obvious reasons. One is you may not see as much if you were younger.
Potentially.
Right. Or you might see more. It just depends. But like,
or you just may have a very different money story than even your siblings might have.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, right? Is like you may not see as much because if you're not the firstborn, you won't see those early years where your parents were struggling. Potentially. Everyone's story is different. Maybe your parents weren't struggling when you were younger, but then they struggled later. Yeah. So depending on your birth order, you might see the years of struggle more than your siblings would, younger or older. And the other one is, by default, if you read about birth order, it really affects your personality. And they've done a lot of studies about this, where the firstborn really typically carries that burden of responsibility. So you, being the firstborn, seeing the struggle financially, the tension, you bore the brunt of that.
I wanted to fix it. I wanted to solve it.
Whereas I don't know if your brothers saw, I mean, I'm sure they saw some of it, and maybe like Will carries some of that, and maybe Cody carries a little bit of that, but maybe it wasn't the same extent that you saw. So anyway, there's something interesting there about birth order. Yeah. We should get them on the podcast. We can all cry together about our money stories. But so for me, like,
your mom did the budgeting.
She did the budgeting. We grew up like middle class, upper middle class. My parents had like white collar jobs. My dad did take care of stuff around the house. Like he liked to do his yard. He liked to wash his own cars. Like he just liked taking care of his things. And he made me like do yard work. I would do the lawn. I would do like the mulching and stuff. But he wouldn't like fix or build things necessarily or include me in that. So I never learned to fix or build anything. And I'm trying to think, like my mom would like do a lot for us, but we had our chores, but outside of those, like we would clean our bathroom and clean our room, but she would do like, she took care of the kitchen and the house and the mopping. Like we never had to do a ton of that. Maybe like once a year we'd do some spring cleaning. So I don't know, like that probably affects like what I expect to do.
I'm so jealous that you missed out on scrubbing toilets as a kid because
no,
I feel like
I did that.
Okay,
I had to clean my own bathroom.
That's like a core.
I had that crappy Comet powder with like those gloves and
scrub it out the bathtub.
It's like why am my face so close to where people pee? Like I don't like this.
But it's interesting the impact on that when we were considering getting a house cleaner, somebody that would come and clean the house every 2 weeks. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, that's just not what I do. Like, I'm not that kind of person. I clean my own house. And I had to kind of work through that. Why would I do this? Do we have the money to do this? You know? Anyway,
and ironically,
that was because of
you were the one that convinced me to hire lawn guys to cut our grass.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I fought that. I was like, no, because the grass is like the one manly thing I do. You know, like I take care of my man lands. And so like, don't take that away from me. That was funny because I always saw my dad mowing the grass.
Yeah.
So to me, that was burned in my brain that you're supposed to mow your own grass. Even though once we moved to Florida, I realized that nobody cuts their own grass in Florida. It's too darn hot. But it took me a while to do that. Yeah. That wasn't a money thing. It was just like that's what. But it's a
narrative. It's an interest. It's still a narrative that you bring into marriage.
Yeah, it wasn't that I felt like it was too expensive.
Right.
I was just like,
right.
What does that say about me?
Yeah.
If I have some other dude cut my grass, I'm glad I don't have that narrative anymore.
You do not have that narrative.
Oh my gosh!
Every time it's 102 degrees outside and someone else is mowing your lawn,
they do it faster and better. And anyway,
I know.
Yeah, best money I've ever spent. But yeah, so like that was me growing up. But we didn't. Okay, my grandfather lived near us, and my grandmother had died, and so he was very close to us, and he spent a lot of time with us. We always had family, dinner with grandpa on the weekends, and he had saved a lot of money. He was a product of the Great Depression, so he was very frugal. He had saved and invested money well, and so he, without his wife around and with just us being the only family around, he was like, well, I want to spend the money that I've saved on my family with them while I'm alive.
Which I love that.
Which is great. Instead of just like, I don't know, giving it to them later as an inheritance. So what that looked like for him, he loved bougie travel, which years ago, I just learned recently, I learned that got him way into debt. Like hundreds of thousands of dollars were put on his American Express card years ago, and it caused a lot of fights with him and Grandma Molly. And I didn't know that. My mom was telling me. Wow. And that's why he ended up taking this military job in Iran for like 9 months, where he got paid like triple pay to go to this dangerous place to wipe out all his debt.
That's right.
I remember you telling me. Let me go away for a year. I can get rid of our debt. So he had like he loved to spend a lot on nice hotels in Europe, and he would travel well. But once he kind of came out of that debt and actually had money, he still loved to do those things, and he shared those experiences with us. So like as a 12-year-old, I flew on the Concorde, which they don't have the Concorde anymore, but British Airways had like one of the fastest planes ever. You could go from New York to London in 2 hours instead of 7.
I'm trying to think like what would the equivalent be now?
Well, it's like imagine first class. It's just like a first class, but the whole airplane is first class, and it's smaller, and there's like white tablecloth waiters on the plane, and it's like bougie food, and I'm complaining about it because I'm 12, and I'm like, I just want a hamburger, and he's like, you shut up, this is like a $5,000 ticket to get you. I'm like, oh, sorry, Grandpa. So,
why does your grandpa sound like The Rock?
Yeah, well, because he kind of was The Rock. He was big and tall, and I never got any of those genes. Come on. And so he would treat us to wonderful experiences, luxury cruises, trips to Europe. He paid for all of my camps, all of my sports. Parents, sports cost a lot of money. Like my parents couldn't afford those things, and so he paid for all those things. So what was interesting is I got to experience some nice things growing up, but I knew it wasn't that we could afford it. It was obvious that Grandpa was paying for it. So I never expected it from my parents.
Did you respect your grandfather? Like, was there something, sort of a sense of awe of like Daddy Warbucks, your grandfather?
Yes. And I remember,
oh my gosh, because I just wonder how much you like channel some of that, because you want to be generous and you want to like give other people these awesome experiences, and I wonder if there's like a little bit of that that's just that he was kind of a hero maybe in a way in that sense.
I think you're right, and I didn't realize it, but one memory that's coming up is I remember I was at his house one day, and it was around Christmas time, and he had this box that came in the mail, and he opened it. It looked like a cool box, and I saw on the logo on the box when he opened it, it said Wrigley's, and I was like, Grandpa, is that like Wrigley's, like the gum, like the gum company? And he opened it up, and it's packs and packs of Wrigley's gum. And I'm like, did somebody send you Wrigley's gum? He's like, yeah, Wrigley's sent me a bunch of gum. I'm like, why are they sending you free gum? And he's like, oh, because I own a lot of stock in Wrigley's.
Yeah.
And I was like, what's stock? He's like, well, I own part of the company.
Yeah.
And so it's like a little gift at Christmas they sent me, and I was like, you own part of the gum company? Like,
you can do that?
You can do that? And he never really taught me about investing, but like I saw it and I was like, dang, that's cool. And then like years later, and I finally realized, oh, that's what Grandpa was doing. So yeah, in a way, maybe because I want to be that when I'm older, which is I want to give my kids and their kids experiences, take off the pressure of those young married years where it's like, dude, I don't have money for a down payment on a house and kids. But all that to say is like I had a taste of the good life, but I never expected it. Like when we got married, I was like, I'm going to be a musician. So I don't think
We're going to be broke.
Yeah, I didn't expect to live even like I did with my parents. Like I just knew like I can look at the math and I ain't got that kind of money.
Yeah.
But there's some of that buried in there.
Yeah. Okay. We should probably give them some tangible examples to have this type of conversation for themselves.
Are you cutting me off?
I'm cutting you off.
I didn't cut your story off, but you're
I
cutting
know,
mine off.
but I'm cutting.
We're gonna
I'm
have to have
cutting
a
us
fight
at
about
30
this.
minutes.
No, we're gonna have to off camera. Like, why did you get a longer?
What are your narratives around podcast length?
Yeah, exactly. Well, my narrative is fairness. I want fairness among how much we get to talk on this show. Okay, so here's the ask for you. Here's the action is if you haven't done this or if you haven't done this in a long time, I want you to have a conversation on a date night, pour your favorite beverage, sit down, and we have a few questions that we can feed you. So write them down that you could ask each other about each other's money story so that you can better understand each other. And then I'm going to give you a what to do with that in a second. So these are just some examples. You can come up with your own. Question one is, was money talked about in your home growing up? Because some of you, it wasn't talked about. That's very common. Mm-hmm. If it was talked about, in what way? So one way to think about it is like, okay, how did your mom talk about money? Mm-hmm. So think about your mom. What did she say? Was it fearful? Was it stressful? Was she always talking about things she wanted to buy? Like, how did your mom talk about money if it came up? And how did your dad talk about money? Because again, they had their own money stories from their childhood. So they may not even have been aligned on their money story. You might be the first people in your family tree to become aligned and create your own unified money story. Mm-hmm. But just think about your mom and your dad. Yep. How did they talk about money?
Yep. Second question would be, what was the perceived financial security in your home? And, I shared a little bit about this with my story, but did you have an overall sense that there was enough, was not enough, was barely enough, was more than enough? Like, what was your kind of day-to-day experience with the money culture of your home and how it made you feel? Did you feel secure? Was there money security or felt money security or felt money insecurity, regardless of what the actual situation was?
Yeah, that's a good one. What about gifts? How did your family handle gift giving for birthdays, holidays? So for example, was your home the home where like Christmas, your parents went all out and that's all you know. So your experience of Christmas was tons of gifts and your spouse might've been like me, where like my experience of Christmas was not a ton of gifts. It wasn't a big to do. Like, I'm
just remembering that Christmas that we had kind of an epic fight on Christmas Eve over this exact topic. Do you remember that? Chloe was like 2 or 3 and it's like 11 o'clock and it's time to wrap presents because we hadn't wrapped them because we had little kids.
Yeah, we're exhausted. Yeah.
And so I'm like, babe, we got to stay up and wrap presents. It's Christmas Eve. And you made some comment like, I don't remember what it was. It was like, this is pointless, or like, this is dumb that we're even doing this. Like, why does she need presents, or something like that? That's how my ears heard it.
I don't think I said that, but.
And it was that idea that you were like, this just really isn't that big of a deal. Which you don't share that sentiment now, but at the time, what I heard from you was like, this is dumb that we bought presents for our 2-year-old or 3-year-old or whatever it was. Like, why are we making such a big deal out of Christmas?
Yes.
And it started a fight on Christmas Eve. I was so sad and offended.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Well, have you gotten over that? Did we?
I don't know. We'll find out this Christmas if it comes back up.
I don't think I did anything wrong, but, whatever. But I think one of the details was also that you grew up, like, some of the presents were hidden, and then you put them together and in front of the tree already put together. And I was like, what? Like, so you want us to stay up late slaving away over putting together a toy? Like, let them do that tomorrow on Christmas. Like, I want to go to bed, or I want to sit with a cup of, like, I don't know, something nice like for Christmas and look at the tree. And I want my Christmas Eve. And it's just funny because, like, my parents didn't do that growing up. Like,
we had totally different expectations.
Just different expectations around, but the money related to gift giving, man, this comes up a lot. Like, what is your expectation for, like, birthdays? Do you go all out on birthdays? I didn't realize that you're supposed to give gifts on Easter. We never got Easter baskets.
Oh, Easter baskets.
I didn't know what that was. And Mom, if you got me one year, forgive me if I'm saying broad strokes. I know I have to say this because my mom listens to the podcast. But I don't remember Easter baskets being a big of a deal. And then all of a sudden Shay's like, oh my gosh, it's Easter tomorrow. We haven't gotten Easter baskets. I'm like, what are you talking about? What do we have to, why are we stressed about this? And we're having to run to Target and buy, chocolate and like nail polish. I'm like, these kids don't need, this is about Jesus, like coming back from the dead and being raised to new life. Why do they need chocolate and nail polish? This is so dumb. But that can cause tension.
Narratives.
It's what you're used to.
Narratives
So
and expectations.
Giving. How did your family handle it? Talk about that.
All right. What about vacations? Did you go on vacation? What was the level of vacation or the type of vacation? For my family growing up, we didn't really take vacations. The closest thing, I never stayed in a hotel. I stayed in a hotel like once or twice when my grandparents came into town. I slept on the floor when I would go stay at the hotel with them. And it was the coolest, most
Kids
amazing
just love
experience
hotels, no
ever.
matter what. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty sure it was like a 2.5-star hotel also. Yeah. And the only vacations we took were just, we would drive to go visit my grandmother. Like that was it. We didn't fly. We didn't take family vacations. We didn't do beach.
Drive to Florida from Virginia. Yeah.
Sorry, we would drive
like road
to
trip.
Florida. Yeah, we would road trip to go there. We didn't fly planes. I mean, it was just so that was the experience I brought in. But what was it like in your family? Were vacations normative? How much did you, what was the perception on what you were spending on them? Were they assumed,
Were you a camping family or a cruise family?
Yeah.
Like what was it like? Yeah. Because that little
we still have disagreements on what is okay to spend on a vacation. I am just very practical when it comes to that kind of thing.
Did you see
practical to a point?
The bill when we went to
No, I did
Puerto
not.
Rico? Okay,
oh my gosh, I don't even want to see it. But the reason why I don't need to see it is because we have a budget. And so I know that our money is managed. And so I can just put aside
You spend far less.
my opinions about it because I know that overall it fits into, which is a great segue into a bit of what we'll talk about next time, that what we'll cover next time on the next show, which I won't tease out just yet, but will help so that there are parameters in place so then everyone can kind of operate in their comfort level with giving, purchasing, anyway.
Man, it sounds like we need to have a conversation.
Still salty about
Woo! I didn't realize that. It was a great trip. It was nice. Last question. This is kind of practical. In your home, if you could tell who managed the finances. So basically, we're trying to figure out what is your expectation. Does the husband manage the finances? Because that's what men are supposed to do. Or is it the opposite? Like, no, mom manages. She took care of the home, so she manages the finances.
Or no one manages.
Or nobody.
You don't have to manage finances.
Yeah. Just somehow it magically works out, which, by the way, it doesn't magically work out. But again, here's the cool thing, and here's where I want to land. Have that conversation, and preface, please do not jump in and judge or even comment on the person's story. We're digging up data.
You're going to shut that conversation down so fast.
We're not just saying, and if you're the person sharing your money story, this is not the place to say, and this is the way we should do it. Give me a second. Like when you do this part, each of you take a turn to just like, hey, let's go back and see if we can even remember, because you might not have thought about it actively in a long time. So like Shay was even having stories pop up for her. So powerful. Just we take turns. Hey, you have 20 minutes or 30 minutes. What comes up for you? Answer these questions, and I'll do it. You're going to learn a lot about each other and about yourself.
Resist the urge to comment. Or give feedback or judge.
Because again, your job is never to judge your spouse's family of origin or the way they were raised or pronounce judgments on, well, that was right or wrong. It's really not your place. What matters is what are you going to do now in your new family? So the follow-up final call to action for you guys is this. Once you've had the money story conversations, 2 questions I want each of you to answer. And you get to answer for yourself, okay? So I would say, question 1, what was the best thing about my money story growing up that I want to incorporate into our new family money story?
Yeah, I love that.
So always start with that.
It
always
honors what your parents did well.
Absolutely, because there was something.
They did something well.
Something well.
Even if it was like they knew how to have fun with money,
Yeah.
right? Like they used money for us to do really fun things, even if you felt broke most of the time. Like everyone is bringing some good something from the way that their parents managed money.
Absolutely. So you want to identify what was the best. I think about it, and it might be hard, but maybe it was a lot of great things. But what was the best thing about your money story growing up that you're like, I want to incorporate this into our new money story, okay? Because I'm bringing something beautiful into it. And then the other question is, what was the worst thing or the hardest thing about my money story growing up that I don't want to play a part in our new family money story? Again, this is you speaking about your own, not your husband saying,
what I think about your money story.
your money story's crazy. We ain't doing that. It is you saying, you know what, when I think back, I didn't like the fact that, whatever, or I don't want this to be true in our story. So if you get to decide what you want to bring and what you want to not bring into the marriage, and then your spouse does the same thing.
Yeah.
What's beautiful about this, and the whole point of this, right, is that the Bible says it pretty clear that a man shall leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife or become one with his wife. And so that's the idea of like, I wasn't a family, and I'm not obliterating that family because the Bible says you honor your family and your father and mother, but I'm now joining with someone else and we're creating a new family together. So we're going to blend. And I think we all want our children and their children and their children to become better versions than we were and have a better life than we did. And so in theory, over the generations, we should be shedding sin and chains and bondage and stuff that held us back and bringing our best into the marriage. And it's not going to be perfect, but hopefully we're getting better and better and better as the years go on. So it's like, hey, we get to write our own money story.
Yep.
Does not have to be what I grew up with.
Yep.
And it might be that like her money story was way better than mine. And it's like, you know what? There's not much from mine I want to bring, but I might even call out, I love that about your money story. Can we do like 90% yours and 10% mine? It might not be even. That's fine too. But what do you want your money story to be? But you don't know how to do that until you know what yours was, what you're bringing into the marriage.
And one helpful way to think about this is what do we want our kids to think, feel, and expect?
Well,
right?
good.
What were the 3 words that you introed with? It was like, what are your beliefs? What are your expectations? What are your emotions? So what do we want our kids to believe about money? What do we want their expectations about money to be? And what do we want their emotions around money to be? And that might help you kind of take a different approach. Maybe it feels a little less defensive his way versus her way, and just like, what do we want to create for our children?
I love that.
Yeah. Love those 2 questions at the end. That's great. I feel like that's really, really helpful.
Yeah. So money story, it's powerful. It's there. It's affecting you whether you know it or not.
Yeah.
And it is going to be the source of all your money fights, whether you know it or not. It's underneath all the things. So it's so worth uncovering. And you're going to find so much more freedom, I think, when you have this conversation. I think you'll have more empathy for your spouse too, which can allow you to serve and love them better.
Yeah. So next podcast, we're going to get even more practical. We're going to deep dive into what I think has been one of the best approaches to money we've ever had, best piece of advice we ever got. It's something that we've used when we had no money, something we still use now that we have more money. You want to tease out a little bit more of what we're going to cover in the next episode?
Yeah, I think it goes along well with your story about like, hey, we have a car repair bill I wasn't expecting. What are we going to do? How are we going to pay for this? The problem when you think about like money and management and budgeting is that it's all in theory in this perfect world where I always get paid this amount and my bills are always this amount. And real life isn't that way. And so what we want to share is a tool that will help us and help you like be able to know that every future unexpected thing is functionally covered. Accounted for so that you don't have to think about it all the time, so you can live your life.
Or argue about it or worry about it.
And it works no matter how much you're making or how little you're making. So we'll give you a simple framework. It's going to be incredibly practical, some tools, some websites, things like that you can use. But I think it's going to help go from once you understand your money story to like, okay, how can we like remove some of the stress and like take care of things in the future without even having to think about it too much.
If you apply what we're going to teach you on this next episode, you will come, maybe not this Christmas, because I don't know how y'all have handled money leading up to the holidays here, but by next Christmas will not be a stressor. Not at all. You won't argue over money. There won't be any kind of resentment over how much we're spending on presents. There won't be any going into debt. There won't be any fear around money. Like if you implement what we talk about, you're going to get to next Christmas and it's going to be really joy-filled and stress-free because of just this very, very, very simple approach to money.
That's a good tease. All right, let's let them go.
Oh, yeah. Well, you got it real quick. What are you grateful for?
Yeah. No, you go first.
I know. All right. What am I grateful for? I am grateful for, I'm grateful we are going to be able to buy my parents a house to retire in. And I'm thinking about that because tomorrow we're going to go out looking for a house for them to moved to Virginia and to Florida, and I would have never, ever thought I would be in a financial place to be able to do that. And so it's just crazy, really crazy. And so I'm just really grateful to be able to do that because we started with a budget 20 years ago is why we can do that. Yeah. It's not like anyway, I'm really grateful for that. So grateful to be able to go and look for houses tomorrow for them. Yeah. And grateful to have a spouse who's aligned with that level of generosity, right? There's a lot of things we could do with that money. We're not just like rolling in extra cash everywhere. There's a lot of things we could do with that. But you and I are both very aligned with around generosity and what we want generosity to look like in our family and, to what extent generosity. So I'm grateful. There's no like weird resentment between us that we're going to do this. My parents were on the same page. So that's long, but that's what I'm grateful for.
Well, that's awesome. I'm grateful for that too. I'm grateful that we can do that. And to that point, I'll make my gratitude about money and about you. And I really thought it was interesting what you brought up about budgeting and how from day one you were like, yeah, I actually want a budget. I want some sense of like we're intentional with our money and we don't have to stress. I am so grateful that when we got married and I got like hardcore into Dave Ramsey and hardcore into like, hey, we got to like pull out cash and have envelopes. I got like really hardcore. You didn't see it as restrictive or like, you're telling me what to do. You saw it for what it was, which was, man, we don't make a lot of money, but we could have a great life if we just had a plan for our money. Yep. And I was so excited about that possibility. And you caught that. You were like, sure, like I'm willing to do whatever. Okay, so we can't spend as much on this, but we can, so that we can have this. And you never fought me on it. You were like, you let me lead out in that area where I was newly learning and I was very excited and I had a vision for like, this could really be game changing for us. And I never felt like pushback from you. It was the opposite. You were like, yeah, let's do more of this.
I felt so much safer knowing, even if it was like we only had $15 to spend on eating out that month, which was factual. actual true story. I would rather know. And now I knew we both knew we could only spend $15 on eating out, which means we're splitting a dish at Jalisco's or whatever the local like
El Charros.
El Charros. We can go split an entree and leave a tiny little tip. I would have, for me, it felt so much safer to know that we both knew what the budget was and than to not have a budget and just wing it and hope for the best. So yeah. Cool. Love you.
That was super cheesy and awkward. I love it. But hey, it's our podcast. What do you want to do? See you on the next episode.
Bye.